Since its launch 10 years ago, Mobiquity Money from Mahindra Comviva has become a flagship solution which now processes 3.6 billion money transactions worth $60 billion a year. The service has already topped 100 million customers in 45 countries, and this landmark is being recognised by the company at this week's Mobile World Congress, where I'm talking to Srinivas Nidugondi. Srini, thanks for talking to us. Now, this service has been going for 10 years. Tell us a bit about the journey.
Interesting, isn't it? I'm not kind of still able to believe that we've crossed 10 years of a milestone of the product, and just recently I thought, we're just kind of starting and about to scale the whole services. But when you look back on the journey, you say, hey, that's been a very interesting and a fascinating journey all through. Right from just starting for what's called recharging your airtime and thinking that that's a great achievement, to 10 years later processing something like $60 billion of money flow across systems, and then seeing such interesting use cases where people deposit money for and kind of do various kind of services, right from paying for the bills, transferring to the near dear ones, but very important things like paying for the visa applications, school children's fee, etc. Suddenly you say that's really transforming and enabling people's lives in terms of making payments and banking so much easier. So that's been a very fascinating journey for me. And when I look back and say, step by step, we kind of start building this whole product. And every time, after a while, we were saying, but I think we've done a lot of things. But when we again go back to the market, we see, there's that much more stuff that we could end up doing. And that's exactly what seems to be the culmination after 10 years. And I think when I look back and say, we've done so much of things, can't believe it.
Now, you're launching a coffee table book, which is a very novel idea, but within that book are some of those very case studies. Who came up with the idea?
I think it was when together in a team setting, we were discussing about saying, when so much interesting stuff has happened, how do you communicate to the world? How do you capture those beautiful moments that kind of stay with you forever, and more importantly will kind of help you motivate by coming up with newer thought processes? We thought the best way is to kind of have a physical book. While everything is digital these days, with the beautiful flavor of a book which is on your coffee table will kind of bring back those memories. And as I said, everybody when my customers and others look at it, they say, this is beautiful. And from a progeny perspective, showing it to people around suddenly is going to be a very satisfactory feeling. And that was the whole way we kind of came out with this book. And I hope everybody who's involved will be quite proud about what's happened.
I'm sure the book will be very well read. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, we talked about the journey, but you must have overcome some very difficult challenges en route, things like regulatory issues. What were some of the big hurdles you've had to overcome?
Sure. As you rightly said, regulations are not the same in each country. So every country has its flavor. And as a platform provider and a product services provider, catering to customers over 45 different countries, we believe it's important to kind of put all those requirements into the product, and that's not going to be easy at all. That's point one. Point two, because it's a financial services platform, it's extremely important to take care of security. And when you deploy, you really realize how people are trying to be innovative to figure out how to find a loophole in the system. So the requirement to make it dumb-proof, idiot-proof, to ensure that any kind of a process that people or service providers come out with, it doesn't have a loophole in the system. That's the second point we look at. Third, very important, which we tend to kind of miss out, is saying, how do I make the system simple from a user experience perspective? And every time we think again, this is easy, but when we go into the field, we realize there can be an easier way of doing things. So I think it's important to kind of make things easy, simple, secure, and as you said earlier, compliant to the regulatory framework. So these three things are quite important for me, but they're not easy at all. So that takes a lot of our time when we're developing the product.
Well, it seems like when you look at those numbers, you've managed to achieve them. How do you see the next challenges? What do you see going forward?
Sure. For me, I think it's after a decade, I can say that it's still the beginning. And we've laid the foundation of enabling money to come in and people to make for payments. However, there are a lot of other things in the financial services requirements of consumers and entities like corporates or SMEs which are still yet to be addressed. For example, how do I ensure I can lend easily to people? So that's the other thought process that we're trying to kind of plug in. Similarly, once the money is in, and how do I ensure you kind of make it work for you? What I talk about here is saying we've been talking about financial inclusion, but how do you kind of traverse the spectrum and say I want to do wealth inclusion? How do I ensure that the money in my account starts growing and working for me? So those aspects are keeping us busy, and we believe that there's a lot more possibilities in the digital world today by ensuring we enable all the financial requirements of consumers and other entities much easier and very much accessible.
Yes, and I guess those requirements are only going to grow with things like IoT, 5G, those kind of new emerging technologies.
Absolutely, is it not? Because we again think of payments to be a person to person, but the ability for payments to be kind of go beyond us and ensuring that every requirement, like, well, we often talk about how a fridge orders for milk, but on a more realistic use case, how can I ensure insurance of my car, the payment is kind of made easily without my intervention? Very clearly, with 20 odd billion devices expected to be in the market in the IoT space, it only is natural to ensure the payment thought processes inbuilt into the system, and the likes of a Visa and Master are coming out with various guidelines, and we believe that's important to kind of look at and ensure that the overall spectrum is covered.
It's a fascinating story. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Appreciate. Thank you very much.